This is CTO Insights, a podcast on engineering leadership. I'm Katerina, your host, and I will be bringing you insights from senior engineering leaders and experts on creating a culture of high performance. This episode is brought to you by Adiva, a global talent network that I founded back in 2014 that connects the world's best companies with the world's best tech talent. At Adiva, we provide access to a global network of top-tier tech and product talent ready to hit the ground running. With the ability to introduce a candidate within 24 hours and an exceptional 98% success rate on trial engagements, Adiva offers the flexibility for companies to scale their teams up or down as needed. If you're looking to expand your team, drive momentum in new projects, or need to backfill a role, Adiva might just be the solution you need. Visit adivait.com to get started. I have the pleasure to host Kamil Dziublinski today. Kamil is the CTO of Xapo Bank, which makes banking with Bitcoin simple. With Xapo, you can put your Bitcoin to work with interest-bearing custody offering, spend your Bitcoin easily with globally accepted debit card, buy or convert Bitcoin to USD, and also earn interest in the process, and also take advantage of convenient ways to transfer funds. It's a very innovative space, which makes me even further excited for this conversation because scaling engineering teams, maintaining high-performing engineering teams is a challenge on its own. But when you're doing it in an innovative space like this, it's a much bigger challenge because you need to find unicorn basically on the market. So, Kamil, welcome and thank you for accepting my invite to join me today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with a quick introduction from your side. Just tell us a bit about your background, your role at the company, and also a bit about the company, the team size, and the structure.
Of course. So my name is Kamil. I'm with Xapo for almost 2.5 years now, and Xapo, as you already mentioned, is a unique place because it is first in the world Bitcoin bank, Bitcoin first bank, and we try to merge the modern world of crypto with the traditional banking. So really give our users the best of both worlds. So the security and the comfort and the safety of banking without the risk of modern banks, really, like fractional reserves. We don't do that. And really with and combine that with the really modern technology that Bitcoin, but also stable coins and the speed of it and reliability provide. So I think it's a very interesting place to work with. I am very happy I was able to join them on this journey. And I initially joined Xapo as a director of engineering. So that was like I said, around 2.5 years ago. And then after around a year, maybe a bit more than that, our existing CTO decided to move on, and then I took over that role. So it was actually around a year ago. So, but the time flies really really fast. Yeah.
Before we got to record this podcast, when we chatted a bit, you told me about your journey within the company, and it was starting as a director of engineering and then moving to the CDO role. And you mentioned that that's the strategy the company has for all of the promotions. So I think it's interesting to start there, and then we can dive further into scaling and maintaining teams in general.
Yeah, sure. This is actually something that our CEO Seamus Roca, he came to this conclusion after a bit of experience with his team. So he could see that it is much more easy to find a good VP or director level, and then let them prove themselves to later enter the C-suite, then actually to try to nail down the right C-level from the get-go. So it seems it is working for him. So both the CTO, I mean myself as a current CTO, and also our CPO, we both went through that route. So we both joined. I was first director, he was a VP, and then we moved on to C-level. Different reasons for that, but in the end, it seems that that has worked quite well. So you can prove yourself first, and then you're almost allowed a seat at the empty table, which I think is actually very healthy approach. And we have also that right now in regards to other members. So for example, we recently hired VP of marketing, and it's similar approach there that you.
Do you have the same approach at lower level, like software engineers, and then promoting them to engineering managers and other roles within the company?
Yeah, this is a very good question, because I'm always a fan, and I'm always really pushing for trying to promote internally. So whenever there is a possibility, we are looking internally first. But I did have already quite a few times a situation where you can really see that there is nobody. For example, you have an open role, let's say for a technical lead, and actually it is the case right now for us. We actually have one open role for a technical lead because we decided to create a new team, and simply there is nobody that is immediately ready, and we know that that role is very, very important to us, because we saw in the past how leadership, both on the product and on the technical side, and how they collaborate with each other, is so crucial to how the whole team functions. And sometimes I will make a decision together with my team to just hire externally when you see, there is nobody that is immediately ready. And there are always paths, right? So we do see candidates that will be ready eventually, but sometimes just don't have the luxury of time to coach those people and mentor them. So it really depends on the need at the moment.
I like the maturity of seeing candidates that might be ready eventually, but they're not ready now. I'm always asking this question when I'm discussing with engineering leaders, because a lot of the issues I've seen with many companies that are promoting internally is not evaluating whether the person is ready or not for the role, and then not specifying and not setting the right expectations about what this role will entail. And oftentimes we see individual contributors that are very high performing on individual level go to leadership position where they don't really understand what the position requires, the sacrifices that they need to make, and the actual output that they are supposed to deliver. And there are a lot of discrepancies, a lot of burnout by people still trying to contribute as individuals but also lead a team. And I'd really like to get your insight on this.
Yeah, I think you can see a lot of decisions that were made based on, like you said, let's promote this person because he's an excellent senior engineer, or in some cases maybe even a principal engineer. And I think that's probably one of the worst ways to pick a right candidate for that role, because on one hand you might actually lose an excellent engineer. On the other hand, you actually might get someone into the role that doesn't even like that role in the end, right? So I think, like you say, I think the sacrifice is a great word to say here, because there is a lot of things that you will no longer be doing, or no longer be doing in this to this extent. So of course, when it comes to engineering, you will be coding less. And I still, for example, believe that when it comes, for example, to tech leads, they should still code, they should still be hands-on. Otherwise, if you are too disconnected, then you're becoming a manager. And of course, if a company has a structure like that, then it's okay, right, to become an engineering manager and maybe don't code, or code very little. But for example, in our case, we don't have, so to speak, engineering managers role. We have technical leads, which are really a combination of the two. So on one hand, you're leading the team technically, and you collaborate with product. You decide, how you build things with your team. You are responsible for architecture, but at the same time, you need to care for your team, right? So there is a bit of that managerial aspect. So it's almost, I like to view that you care, that you wear a couple of hats. So you wear a hat of a manager, and you wear a hat of an, let's say, architect, for at least for your local architecture. and then you were ahead of a software engineer, usually senior software engineer. So it's a difficult role, in my opinion, because you need to be able to balance and find time for those things, and then decide, okay, what's more important in the moment. So yes, I think that's why it's very important to find a person that wants to grow that path. And I used to always ask this question. I actually still ask that question sometimes during recruitment process. I ask people, do you see your path of growth more in the direction of that, like technical lead manager, right, managing a team, or do you see yourself like like a more like an expert, right? So more like a principal engineer, maybe architect. So where you are still a leader. To me, those are still leadership roles, but just without managing the team. And I think
Right.
that's the difference. Yeah.
Do you have a concrete approach when it comes to evaluating? You said people are potentially will be ready, but they're not ready at the moment to go into a leadership path. What's the concrete approach you have for evaluating that and also communicating the change and the expectations?
Yeah. I like to see people being proactive about and starting to doing things for that role while not being in that role yet, right? I'm very against doing the opposite, where you say, okay, let's give that person a new role and then let's see if that person can do it. No, I think you need to be showing to your manager, to your team, to your potential peers, that you are actually already keen on doing certain things. And yeah, it's tough, right? Because then you're doing your job, plus you're doing some
Yeah.
additional work that is almost outside of your job. But this is also how we evaluate people. That's why we say you exceed expectation, right? Or you set new standards. So for me, this is the way, right? If other, for example, let's say we have an engineer that wants to become a tech lead, right? So if other tech leads that are not directly working with that person starts to notice that guy, right? Starts to notice that person, that he's proactive, he's collaborating with the team, he communicates a lot outside of his team, he's taking ownership about some initiatives. Then this is a good indicator that maybe that person is, getting ready. And then you can add on top of that the right goals, the right coaching and mentoring, and then before you know, you might have a person that actually is ready enough. Because I also don't think you need to be 100% ready. I think you just
Yep.
need to be ready enough to go into that role, and then you will still have support from your peers, you will have support from your new manager. So in this case, right, it will be for example, a director. So this is how I evaluate. And then when it comes to tech lead versus technical, usually it's about the soft skills and what that person wants, right? So you need to have a certain level of soft skills if you want to work with people and manage people, right? It's not that technical leaders don't work with people, but they work with them in a different way, right? It's more like yeah, different set of skills is required, in my opinion.
Right. Okay. Let's shift a bit to scaling. I'm curious to hear about the different stages of the company and also the changes in team structure, the challenges. Maybe also share a bit about the stage the company was at when you joined and what were the things that changed in the meantime.
Mhm. Xapo is a very interesting company in this sense that it's has been set up 12 years ago. So it's actually a company with history, but it went through different pivots. So they had a different business. It was more custodian business, and then our founder decided to pivot into a bank. So they were actually much bigger at some point. Then they changed the structure of the teams. But the moment where I joined 2.5 years ago was the moment where they were when Xapo was in the middle of transformation. And back then when I joined, I think we were around 80 in technology department. And then we started the hiring. We hired new tech leads, more engineers. We actually brought on also some external consultants like ThoughtWorks. And then then there was a point last year in 2023 when the market changed a lot, right? So we went into bear market in crypto, but also if you look at, there was also like across the world in finance, increased inflation rates and all of that, and then also other big companies were letting go people, and we also had to go through a phase of reorganization. So we had to reduce headcount a little bit. So we went from 100 to what we have right now, around 65 in technology, 65 people, with still open roles. So it's not like we completely freezed hiring, but we are much more strict when it comes to opening new roles. So really trying to evaluate if this is really needed right now, if this is critical. If so, we'll still hire. But yeah, we had to let go some people. So it was interesting, right? I joined, it went up, then it went down, it's going up again. So I do really hope that once the market, let's say, it's actually going in the right direction when you look at the Bitcoin price. So if it would continue like that, I think we will still expand much more eventually. So I definitely would like to have more people. There are definitely a lot of needs here and there to cover, but yeah, we need to also be quite pragmatic at the moment.
And back when you joined, was the engineering team already established, or because you said they were in different business models?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was established. So the whole technology department. So right now, what is under technology? We have security, we have engineering, which involves both mobile and backend engineering, and then we have also some roles around in the data team. So this all constitutes the technology. So those are the key people that report to me, and they are responsible for their divisions. And it was just set up slightly differently. So when I joined, it was actually it was pretty much the beginning of switching to a cross-functional setup. So we use, and maybe you have read the book Team Topologies, but this is actually was something that was that we took a lot of inspiration from, and this is a great book, and I recommend it to every technological leader, because it really shows a very fresh look at how you think about different teams. So you have the key team. Usually product teams are what we call SATs, which is stream-aligned teams. So those are cross-functional teams, or actually how they like to call it in the book, self-sufficient teams, which doesn't always need to mean that you always need a mobile engineer, because it's just about the team's needs, right? So they just simply need to be able to address the needs of the streams that are coming their way. But then you have some teams that are supporting those teams. So for example, you might have a platform team, which is a team of DevOps preparing infrastructure and developers experience for those engineers. And then you might have security, which is your more like an enabling team. So basically they go in, help someone, and then they let them go on themselves. So I think it's very well explained in the Team Topologies book, and we took that, we twisted it a bit. So I also added there a notion of tribes, which was more how to take few teams, so few SATs, and put a business objective around them, and make them collaborate together. So if you look at our structure, one of such tribes would be growth tribe, which is really focusing on collaborating with marketing, with things related to onboarding like AML and compliance, right? And those teams collaborate together. And then you will have other tribes with other teams inside responsible for other KPIs that the business is really cares about. So I think this is a quite nice twist to the raw Team Topologies book that we implemented, and it's working well for us. So yeah, we grew the teams, and then we reshuffled some things. We for example did the change where there is now a very small mobile team that is helping other teams, but you have still mobile engineers in those SATs, because you want to have still cross-functional teams. Although in the very long term, I'm thinking if we might not go back to the central mobile team again. But for that to really go in that direction again, I think we would need to have much more things in place technologically. So there are a few things that we would like to, invest more time in, like contract testing, better specification on back end for front end patterns and usage of them. And there are a few things that then almost allow you to collaborate with between engineers on a more code level, and you don't need to have so much the structure of the teams to cover for that. And I think you need some kind of maturity on the technological level to change your structures in a certain way. So I think that's why we won't do it now. But I think long term that could be beneficial to us. So I'm more like exploring this idea for now. Yeah.
This is great. And let's go into team performance structure, what you're using, and then we'll go back to scaling, because there are a few other things that I'd like to cover. But since you started, it's a very interesting topic that I really want to dive in. You mentioned tribes and the business logic that kind of encompasses all of the tribes, and I love that, because a lot of times we kind of miss to pass that business information to the tech teams. So this is something that I'd like to dig further into, and also the day-to-day approach. Like, what do you use for? Do you use any specific methodology? Are you using some combination of many? How do you ensure that your teams are performing and that you pass the proper information and vision to all of the team members?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Couldn't agree more that too often the direction where the company needs to go as a business is somehow lost and not translated to how technology, or maybe some other department as well, is supposed to contribute to that. So I think that this, as a CTO, is my key responsibility. This is how I perceive that role, is that I'm that translation, I'm that bridge from where we want to go strategically as a business, and how this translates into where what technology is focusing on, right? So I achieve that through a couple of ways, and one of the main tools or methodologies that I use is OKRs, really, right? For me, setting up goals, so really clear objectives for the whole year that are much more high level, but then quarterly OKRs, so quarterly key results and targets for them, is what helps you iteratively go about setting up direction for your technological teams. And then we have a structure in place where people from the CTO team, so heads of different divisions, they look at those OKRs, which we of course work collaboratively on, like what we want to focus on next. And they translate that with their teams into different initiatives. And they might have their own OKRs, like on a lower level, right? But they translate that into different initiatives, and we made sure that there is a structure in place where it's all documented. Everybody can see it. Everybody can provide feedback to it. Even people outside of technology team, right? So even our CEO, for example, can read that and ask, why are you focusing on this or that? And it's not about micromanagement, but it's sometimes about creating visibility, transparency, and also possibility to contribute on that. So those are the things that are more on a high level, and they serve us well. So of course we track things in an automated fashion. So we have different data dashboards that allow us to see if we are on track with those things or not. And then we have also some kind of setup with monthly meetings with the CTO team, where we go through different initiatives. We look at RAG status. So is the initiatives red or amber or green? Are you on track? Are you gonna miss the deadline? So those are the things that really help us to talk about and talk openly about where we are. Like maybe something came up, something was a blocker, maybe we didn't expect some things that had to be worked on and delayed other stuff. So those are things that help us on this layer on this level. And then on a more lower level, we follow sprints. So the teams work in sprints, and of course we have in each streamline team we also have a product owner. So the tech lead and the product owner, to me, they need to be very tight. They need to really collaborate closely with each other and really even challenge each other, right? Because there is always like this healthy friction and this balance that needs to occur between what product needs to deliver and what technology needs to deliver. We actually have a quite interesting deal, so to speak, between me and the CPO, and it translated to the rest of product and technological organization, is that we say, by default, we give 70% of those cross-functional team to 70% of their time is dedicated to product budget, and then 30% is dedicated to tech budget. And then we need to juggle the things, because in the tech budget then you need to do some tech debt, you need to focus on security vulnerabilities, maybe some data improvements, and then on product you build features, but then you also handle internal stakeholders. So yeah, it's always some act of juggling those priorities and focusing on what's going to bring the highest business value. But yeah, this is how we go about that. And I think also some of the cool things that we do is that we have this kind of meeting where we do showcase of delivered work in the last few weeks. So every team goes, and this is not leaders showing, but it's actually engineers and product owners showing what they delivered, really very hands-on. So I think those structures that we have in place help us to make sure that the message goes down, is really cascaded well throughout the organization, and we are focusing on the right things.
Right. And in those self-sufficient teams, you have a team leader and a product owner in each of those?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you mentioned the CTO team. Are the team leaders part of the CTO team, or do you have some additional layer in the hierarchy of the company?
No, there's an additional layer. So if you look at the SATs, those are tech leads, and then there at the CTO team you have more like a director layer. So director of engineering, head of data, head of mobile apps, head of infrastructure, CISO, right? So head of security.
And they overlook several teams, each of them, right?
Yes. And usually they have managers reporting to them, or technical leaders. So this is the structure. And then on the product side, you have VPs of product that have POs under them, and VPs of product, they report to the CPO. So this is how it is mirrored. It's not exactly one-to-one, because it shouldn't be. So actually I see engineering is a bit more horizontal, while product is more vertical. But yeah, this works well for us.
And when you mentioned the budget split between tech and product, feature development, you're considering part of product. And then on the tech side, you mentioned technical debt, I don't know, tooling, security, that type of things.
Yes. This is pretty much how we split it. Yeah. So all the work that is happening on improving the app, not covering technical debt, right? But like adding new features, or maybe improving existing flows, or like having new integrations. Like in our case, we are banks. Sometimes we want to enable, I don't know, new rails. So this all falls under product. While from that 30%, we really try to cover the needs that we have on technological side. It can be different things, because when I joined, the main focus was on stability. So we did a lot of work on monitoring stability. That was the focus of the first year. We really I actually did a presentation on that one of the conference. We really did a lot of work on how to bring our mean time to recover from. Actually, we improved it by 97%. So that was a huge leap. And then we started focusing on other things like time to market. Now is actually a lot focus on data security. This is and scalability, because we know we might get a huge wave of customers, given that the bull run is probably starting or already started. So we are focusing on scalability a lot right now, so just to not be caught by surprise.
In terms of tooling and infrastructure, what's the setup you have? Are there some things that you're definitely, I don't know, recommending to other teams?
So we have a dedicated team that is responsible for infrastructure and development experience. So we call them PET, Platform Engineering Team. And this is, if you look at team topologies, this is a great example of a platform team, which basically provides an internal tooling as a product to engineering team. And so basically their client engineers are their users in this regard, right? So this is the setup. And one thing that is really something that is guiding us, a guiding principle, is that we just want our teams to be as autonomous as possible. So we really want to make sure that there is a lot of tooling provided by that team to engineers, and they can do, where possible, those things by themselves, maybe with some documentation, internal documentation, and that's the case. Not to always have to raise an internal ticket and please set up this infrastructure for me, or this database, or I need this service. But ideally, we have everything in Terraform right now. So ideally, even engineers can contribute to Terraform, maybe make a pull request and let pet team review it, and then have that done, or even have an internal tooling like some kind of Slack bot where you can give a command and it will set up a service for you. And we have that in place now. So we really made a lot of progress on that regard, because even before I joined, I know that the world looked quite different at Xapo when it comes to infrastructure and how that collaboration was looking.
That's great. It's always amazing when people recognize, the need of, you mentioned, developer experience to ensure the performance of the team. And now that we went that direction, maybe we can talk a bit about, measuring and everything else that you have in place. And I remember that, the article that went out by McKinsey about measuring developer productivity and whether you can do it or not do it. And there was a lot of different opinions in the industry. So I'm very curious to hear from your side. Is it mostly developer experience that you invest in and return, performance, expect performance as a side effect, or you have some more specific targets, metrics?
Yeah, I think the metrics around engineering performance are quite controversial topic, especially among engineers. And I am from that background, so I was an engineer for many years, so I understand that well. And I'm personally against using any metrics to evaluate the performance of the teams. I think the metrics can be very valuable. Any metrics that is about performance should be only used by that team, and not comparing to another team. Because on one hand, you can game the metrics, right? And if you start doing that, when you try to compare teams, those metrics simply can be gamed. But at the same time, you usually cannot compare oranges to oranges, because there are different projects. The teams work on different needs in the business or outside the business, and it's actually very hard to compare two teams to each other, just based on some metrics either in Jira or whatever you look at. So I like to have metrics in place that allow me to see where are the impediments for the teams and what is actually blocking them from acting faster, from working faster, delivering faster. So even though I think some metrics that can show you, for example, time to market can be useful, but I would not use them to evaluate the performance of engineers. I would use them to find like what's actually preventing them from working
Mm-hmm.
faster, right? So that's why I think DORA metrics are an interesting one, right? So they focus on like 4 metrics there, like deployment frequency, time to recover, change failure rate, and there was fourth one I forgot. But lead time, yeah, or cycle time, yeah, that was the fourth one. So I think that this is a very good thing to look at your own organization and also your own infrastructure and see, okay, is my CI/CD process fast enough? Do for example builds get blocked for 1-2 days in some testing pipeline, or blocked on staging? And maybe we should move to more continuous integration environment. So those are the things. Then you can also base, even looking at some metrics like deployment frequency, you can see, okay, are we actually releasing a couple of times a day? Or maybe you have a monolithic architecture, maybe you should switch to microservice architecture. So I think for example, from our own perspective, so we could see that from DORA metrics, some of the metrics were healthy, and we actually start looking at them regularly. So we just kept some of them, and the rest we thought like, okay, they are okay, and they have been okay for months, and there is no indication that they are unhealthy. So you are aware of them, but you don't need to focus on them so much. So you focus on other things that might be actually unhealthy in your organization. But coming back to the topic of performance, because you still might have underperformers, right? But
Right.
I like to see that more on an individual by individual case. So I really like to have tech leads that look at that and are not afraid to evaluate their engineers like that, like the same way like I'm really evaluating my own team as well, right? And looking if they are all strong leaders. So recently I was watching actually an interview with the CTO of Netflix, and there is a very very nice thing that they do at Netflix, which I actually was doing as well, but I wasn't naming it the same way as they named it, and I think it helps with the mental framework, and they call it a keeper test. So basically, they ask themselves, the managers, the leaders, they ask themselves, would I do everything I can if that person would resign today or not, right? And if the answer is no, well, yeah, then you need to ask yourself, why is the case? Can I help that person to grow, or maybe that person should find a different role? It might sound a bit brutal, but I think it's actually a great way of evaluating the performance of your team, and also a great way to make sure that you respect your high performance. Because I think if you allow low performance in your team, then it's almost disrespectful to your high performance. That's simple as that. And you want to keep your high performance, of course. So yeah, this is my take on it.
This is amazing. It's always overlooked because especially when you have a personal relationship with someone, it's so hard to evaluate them properly or objectively. But keeping them in the team is affecting the whole team, is affecting high performing individuals, the morale and everything. And also it might be affecting the individuals. Like maybe they don't perform because they don't fit in well, or they're not aligned with the vision or something. And breaking part might be the best for two sides, but it's prolonged for too long.
Yeah. I mean, there are sometimes ways, creative ways of just making sure that you utilize someone's talent in the right way. I remember in the past I had experience where I could see that just giving someone different set of responsibilities could bring more out of that person. But it's not always possible. But I think it should be at least taken into consideration that maybe I need to give that person different task, right, or different role.
Right.
But not always possible.
Is it the right person in the wrong seat, or the
Yeah,
wrong person in the wrong seat?
exactly. Yeah.
You mentioned CI/CD and applying it, going further with it within the team, depending on how the team performs and everything. Curious about the setup. Do you have continuous delivery throughout all of the teams? And a very important question I want to address: the role of QA within your company. How much manual QA do you have? What's the structure in that regard?
Yeah. It's a great question because we had quite a transformation when it comes to QA. So on the CI/CD part, we have automated process to get things to staging or like pre-production environment, and then from there we manually promote it to production. And we rely a lot on feature switcher, feature toggles to make sure you can actually ship code but not necessarily release it, right? So I really like to separate the two, because I think it's important that the release train, so to speak, that doesn't stop for anybody, but you can, thanks to that, deliver unfinished code and simply not enable it. And so that's a very good one. But when it comes to QA, so we used to have a central QA team with QA engineers in the team, but like it was centralized under one head of QA. But we went away from that. So we really did shift left, so to speak. And right now the responsibility of testing is more on the side of engineers and both mobile and backend engineers. And we write automation tests and we have all those things, but we don't have manual testers anymore. So we will do sometimes like functional tests together with the team. There is a person helping coordinate that. But no, we went completely away from a central QA team, and I see good things happening from that. I see less throwing over the fence, so to speak, right? So you finish your work as an engineer and then you throw it over to the QA.
Yeah.
Definitely affects a lot the time to market. So not having QA team allows you to ship faster, because usually the person doing the testing has all the context and there is no back and forth on, okay, I find the bug, fix the bug, right? And of course it also motivates the team to have more and more quality automation tests where possible, so that feedback loop is fast, and also you don't have to do so much manual testing, because no engineer really likes to do that. So I think I'm very happy with this. Has happened around a year ago or more than a year ago, so we had enough time to look at the new world, and I think we are in a better place. I'm not saying this setup of central QA team doesn't work, but in our case, we find that going in a bit different route was beneficial to us. Yeah. But you need to create that QA culture, and like with every cultural change that you do in the company, I think that is the hardest thing to do.
Yeah.
So whenever you need to bring QA culture, data culture, I don't know, security culture, you need to somehow adjust the processes so that the habits can change. If you just try to inject the new culture but you don't change anything about day-to-day work, it will simply not happen. The shift will not happen.
How did you adjust the processes?
Yeah, we slowly removed the manual testers. So in our case, most of the manual testers were actually external consultants, so it were not internal Zapians. There were some, but majority were coming from some companies we were working with. So yeah, we simply cut that slowly, and then promoted internally the messaging that now the responsibility is on engineers. In some cases, there was of course a bit of resistance, right? With usually with those kind of changes that you bring. But I think with time, people started seeing the benefits of that setup, and then at the same time, this was married with the right metrics to see if we are introducing degradation of service or not. So in other words, do we have more bugs? Do we have more incidents? But I think it is quite healthy. So we track those things, but with time, engineers adjusted, and I didn't see a negative effect in the quality of that we deliver. But at the same time to market increased. So it's a tricky one, right? Because you might think, oh, but if you have a QA, then an engineer can start working on other things. But actually, in practice, it is not necessarily the case, because then he has to context switch to fix the bug, and it's back and forth between the QA. And yeah, I mean, from my practice, it's from my own experience, I mean, it's not really the case that it's faster than.
Yeah, I agree. And it's the mindset, because when you think that someone else is responsible for the quality, you just don't care enough to make sure it has it ticks all of the quality boxes. You just send it to someone else and then expect them to report it back if something is missing.
Yeah, exactly. Like the ownership is not there, right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the scaling part. You mentioned several times about using external partners for scaling the teams. What's your approach there, and what advice would you have for other CTOs, like balancing between internal hiring, external talent partners?
yeah. It is a tricky one, really. I think sometimes it can be very beneficial to bring outside people to help you with some project. I would never do that for core domains personally. So I like that separation, that you have core domains, supporting domains, and generic domains. And core domains are simply the domains that give your company competitive advantage. So to me, those domains should always be tackled by internal teams, because those are the most critical ones that get you ahead as a company. But there are situations where it can be helpful to bring some external people on the board, because even hiring takes time, and sometimes you just need to deliver something faster. But I think, as important as it is to bring additional people on board, it's also as very important to understand when do you cut that, or when do you transition into hiring internally. And I don't think there is a clear recipe for success. I think it really needs to be evaluated based on the needs of the project, or of the company. We here at Xapo have been working for a while with ThoughtWorks. I mentioned that. So I think it was an interesting experience. So they definitely brought in a lot of cultural shifts. So I think it in that particular case, they come with a big group, and they enter different areas of the organization, like management team, product, engineering, DevOps, and they can help you push a company in slightly different directions. So I think in this case it was useful, but at the same time, I think if you keep too long, then you will start seeing diminishing returns. So I think it's also important to make that strategic decision and say, okay, from this moment we are good, and we are hiring the right people to have it internally. But am not afraid of working with external companies, but I think it's really, you need to really evaluate each project and see, does it make sense here or not? And maybe sometimes you bring some additional people to work with your internal team just to give additional hands. I have been having some positive experience there, but I also seen some more negative sides of that as well. And the most negative side is usually lack of ownership, which is what we just spoke about when it comes to QA, right? Because they know they will leave, right? So it's a very natural thing, unless you have a person that is cares about quality anyway, right? You have those experts as well, but you cannot always depend that this is going to be the case. So this is a bit more tricky to manage, in my opinion.
And otherwise, when it comes to team distribution, is everyone an employee? Do you work with contractors? Are people remote across the world, or specific locations?
Yeah, we are fully remote, globally distributed company. So even though there is a lot of us in Europe, there is also a big chunk of us in South America, Asia, different parts of Asia, and Africa as well. So we are really spread across. We kind of operate around European time zone though. So like majority of meetings are so our headquarters is in Gibraltar. So usually like the more global meetings, like all hands and things like that, or leadership team meetings, they are usually in the time zone where everybody can join, but it's more like in the middle of the day for Europe. And yeah, we 95% or maybe even more, those are internal employees. So we have very little right now consultants, but there are some here and there. But this is a minority. And in the technology department, I think at the moment we have, if I'm not mistaken, I think we have one that we are actually bringing in house anyway, because he's a very strong developer. So yeah, that is what we are really focusing on, because this helps us to really create a great high performing culture, and that's why we really want to invest into having internal Zapians, and only when we have to. Sometimes we work with different companies. So even recently we have been working with some company that were helping us a bit on the data side, because our data team was too small and we are hiring for that. So there are those needs that arises, and we work with some company to fulfill the needs, but then eventually we want to in-house it. So this is usually a strategy if it's a critical part of the business.
And when it comes to hiring, you mentioned the hiring process is expensive. Do you have any method for evaluating for retention when you hire new people?
And when you say hiring for retention, you mean to making sure that people stay? And that's what you mean? Or
Yes.
yeah.
Like when you hire them, do you evaluate them somehow to make sure that they will fit the structure of the company, the pace of work, and everything you have, apart from the technical, the soft skills?
Yes. Yeah. There is a step that I don't think it's used in every company, but this is something that I already introduced in the previous company. Is a soft skill interview. So for engineers, of course, everybody does technical interview, right? That's sometimes we were also doing. Sometimes you do a technical test, and then you do a technical interview, and you ask different questions, or you allow the candidate to walk you through what he has prepared. But for me, the last step is, and it is as important, is the soft skill interview. And this is in our case, it's usually happening with with the director and me, if it's for engineering. But I still, at this stage, I'm in a comfortable spot where I want to join almost all. Sometimes I'm not able to, but majority of the final interviews, to bring candidates on board. Because it is so important for me to bring the candidates with the right mindset, with the right culture. And those soft skill interviews, they are around that. So you ask questions that are about trying to figure out if there is a cultural fit, if that person will be loyal, if that person, which path they want to take in growth, and different kinds of questions. I had sometimes feedback from some of the candidates that they found that soft skill interview much more difficult than the technical interview, even though it's a conversation like me and you are having more or less right now. But yeah, some people find it actually difficult, and I had many times situation where someone was excellent in a technical interview and they simply didn't pass the soft skill interview. So, but like I said, it's equally important. So, if someone doesn't pass that, he simply won't be able to join us, because sometimes for me, it's even more important to have a team player than someone that ticks all the boxes technically, because sometimes it's quite easy to pick up a new technical skill if you are a solid team player and you have the right attitude, while the other way around is usually much harder, because it's about personality and attitude and culture. So yeah, this is how I try to go about it. But to be honest, this is more like an art than science. And I find this and after so many years of recruiting, we sometimes still get it wrong. But that this is where proof period comes into play, right? So the proof period, I'm also not very afraid of saying, okay, this doesn't work, right? After 3 months, 3 or 4 months, because you can only see as much during the recruitment process, but then you have another 3 to 4 months to see, did you get it right, basically.
That's great. One last thing to wrap up. What would be some final words, some tips that you'd like to share with anyone listening to this?
If this is aimed at the leaders, technological leaders, it's CTO insights after all. One piece of advice I would give is, when you are a person growing into that role, there is a point in your growth that you need to stop being afraid of trusting yourself more than external opinions, right? So it's always good to read books, listen to podcasts as this one, but eventually you need to grow this kind of confidence and this kind of internal compass, actually, that will tell you, this is the right way, and I will listen to that, because I think without that you will always be looking externally first when making key strategic decisions, and eventually you need to turn inwards. And I think this is the key, and you will not get it right every time, but it's also important to not be afraid to admit, okay, I was wrong, but let's pivot. New data is present, and just be humble about it, and that's it, right? Nobody expects you to know all the answers, but I think that step is a key step in a growth of the leader.
That's amazing. An excellent way to wrap this up. Thank you, Kamil, once again for being my guest, and hope
Thanks.
everyone enjoys this.
Yeah, me too. Okay.